Hello, and welcome to My Drug Hell's first ever CD bonus track. As we're all big fans of vinyl, and would like to do everything we possibly can to help save the format from dying out completely, all our singles so far have come out on 7-inch only, or, as in the case of our last one, on CD as well as 7-inch, but without any bonus tracks on the CD version. We deliberately chose not to put any extra tracks onto our last CD single, because we thought that if we did, then some of our vinyl-loving fans might actually go out and buy it instead of the 7-inch, on the off chance that the bonus tracks might be worth listening to. Unfortunately, the shop price of a single is decided by the shop, and not us, and so when we discovered that our 2-track CD was selling at the same price as others containing 3 or more tracks, even we began to feel a little sorry for our CD-buying fans. So in order not to rip you off completely this time, we thought we ought to include some sort of a bonus track, but at the same time we felt that it had to be something that none of our vinyl-loving fans would actually want to own. So in case you're wondering, this is the bonus track. There's no music to follow, and it gets no better than this. Incidentally, the reason we called it bonus track number 9 instead of bonus track number 1, for example, was as a tribute to Revolution number 9 by the Beatles, almost certainly the least popular track they ever recorded. If you've never heard it, it's probably because virtually no one ever plays it. It's made up almost entirely of randomly chopped up bits of noise and abstract conversation, and goes on for about 8 minutes, although it seems a lot longer. Very few people manage to make it through to the end even once, and so that's the inspiration for this track. If you want to know why we seem so desperate to irritate the majority of our following, this isn't just about records coming in big sleeves that you can roll joints on and all of that sort of stuff. The real reason for all of this is because we seriously believe, in all seriousness, that records sound better than CDs. And as you probably think I'm just some deluded fool, I shall now hand you over to the producer of our music, and an expert in the field, Dr. Fellini Retrospective. Hello, my name's Fellini Retrospective. The average human ear can distinguish sound up to 16 kHz. In order to preserve valuable memory space on a CD, all sounds above 20 kHz, just a note or two higher than average human hearing, are automatically clipped off. Because these notes are out of the range of most people's hearing, in theory, this should not affect the sound. However, without these higher frequencies interacting and harmonizing with what we can hear, the overall tone may be considerably altered. If this seems like the sort of difference only a sound engineer or a dog would be concerned with, consider this. In the early 90s, Professor Jack Dinsdale carried out a series of tests into the difference in sound quality between CDs and records at the Royal Institute in London. Using a high-quality turntable and a high-quality CD player, he played the same pieces of music on both mediums to audiences unaware of which they were listening to, and asked them to choose the version they liked the best. Repeatedly, between 90 and 95% picked what proved to be the vinyl as the one they preferred. Professor Dinsdale concluded that on quieter sections, CDs actually contained more distortion than vinyl, and that a good quality turntable could bring out every sound the best CD player could, plus a lot more. Commenting on the fact that most of the CD manufacturers approached refused to take part in the trials, Professor Dinsdale said, "They're scared of being humiliated. They know their product's going to be trounced by the LP." He went on to suggest that for around 1/10 of the cost of converting an average LP collection to CD, one could buy a top-quality turntable and get the ultimate sound available off the same old records. In order for music to be recorded onto a compact disc, it must first be broken down into several million ones and zeros. Each sample of sound is then followed by a small gap in the sound. So not only is much of the original sound now missing, but what was once a continuous, smooth sound wave has now been turned into an interrupted one with tiny squared-off edges. When CDs were first introduced in the United States, a number of reports began to come in from psychiatrists who used music to help relax their patients. They were discovering that after switching to CD, the music they played their patients no longer seemed to calm them. There is much about sound we don't understand. We know that some sounds can dissolve kidney stones or lower heart rates, while others can make people sick or induce involuntary diarrhea. Much of what we do know has been discovered by accident, often unfortunate. No one knows whether some kind of relaxing or healing effect may have been removed from a sound by taking a round wave, converting it into binary, and then reconstructing it. Perhaps the biggest problem with building a telesporter in real life is how to keep something alive after you've just broken it into a zillion tiny pieces. Is it possible that by turning music into computer code, we have somehow killed a part of it? Is it merely coincidence that so many people, from fans to hi-fi experts and musicians, continue using words like cold, clinical, and lifeless to describe digital sounds? And if in tests, 9 out of 10 people actually preferred the sound of vinyl, isn't the real reason we may have sacrificed so much from the way we now listen to recorded music not because we especially like the way CDs sound, but simply because they are more convenient? Thank you, Fellini. So considering that many people still buy records even now when they are given the choice, why is it that so many albums are no longer even released on the format, even when there is a demand? To answer this question, I have with me a Randy Atlantis, the author of Completely Duff, The History of the CD. Thank you. The answer, unsurprisingly, is money. CDs cost less to produce than records and sell for more. Before their introduction in the early to mid-80s, many major record labels were in big trouble. Having rid the airwaves of almost everything except for people like Spandau Ballet and the Thompson Twins, they were now surprised to find overall sales at an all-time low. Single sales had fallen so dramatically that by 1992 it was possible to get to number 1 with the kind of sales that wouldn't have even got you into the top 50 in 1966. The very existence of some major record companies was under threat. The arrival of the compact disc single-handedly saved the fat asses of the coke-sniffing, glorified bank managers the majors were now being run by. Not only did the high retail price result in a huge increase in profits, but their overall workload was effectively halved at a stroke. With the opportunity to resell entire back catalogs of already world-famous artists, suddenly it no longer mattered if they didn't sign a new act for the next 10 years. In fact, in many ways it made better sense not to. Why risk a small fortune trying to launch some unknown, untested wannabe who 9 times out of 10 wouldn't even recoup costs, when they could live off the fatted pop star's rotting corpse for another decade yet, and still on his 60s royalty rate? Instead of having to forever hunt out the next Alison Moyet or Wet, plus of course a suitable producer, PR team, radio plugger, strike force, etc., now all they had to do was dust off some old master tapes and run it off to HMV. The search for new talent soon became a simple matter of buying up acts already established by the independents, or if necessary, buying up those labels outright. Those who were signed were even persuaded to take a 10% cut in their royalty rate to pay for the marketing of the new CD medium. Incredibly, many labels were still deducting this amount as much as 10 years later. When this practice finally became discredited, several companies decided they would deduct 10% nonetheless, only now claimed it was to make up for all those supposedly unbreakable CDs they insisted were now breaking in transit. Of course, none of this would have been possible had people continued buying records, and so when the majors saw that millions of people were still doing just that, and had no intention of switching to CD, many began to wind up their vinyl production regardless of demand. Sold on dubious claims of the best possible sound and a lifetime's worth of jump-free playing time, the compact disc has proven to be one of the great marketing scams of the 20th century, whose only real achievement is to have made a lot of people in ponytails with names like Miles and Crispin even richer than when they started. The only serious argument in their favor remains their programmability, and the fact that you don't have to get up to skip a track. And yet the primary reason it has become so essential to skip tracks the whole time is because so much garbage is now getting thrown onto them. Thanks to the expanded running time, most artists are now expected to produce nearly a double LP's worth of material for every album they put out. This on top of an EP's worth for every single they manage to come up with, and almost twice that for a CD double pack, means that all but the most prolific are being stretched to creative breaking point. So the songs get longer, and everything gets thrown on. Pointless demos, laugh tracks and studio jams, and anything not quite good enough for the album. A truly disturbing thought. Even the Beatles chose to put out only one double, and that's the one with Revolution number 9 on it. Just the phrase quality control somehow sounds outdated, and yet when was the last time you listened to more than 40 minutes of a recent album? It is asking too much from the listener, who shouldn't have to pay money just to hear their favorite bands demystify themselves, and it is asking too much from the bands, who probably only took up music as a way to avoid working for a living. Thanks, Randy. By now you'll probably understand why we named this track after Revolution number 9. You may also have gathered that the reason we've made this track the way that we have, apart from so that our vinyl fans won't be missing out on any extra songs, was to try and persuade you, our CD buying public, to buy us on vinyl in future, even if it's only to avoid more tracks like this one. And it's probably only fair to point out that should you not feel sufficiently put off by this track and continue to buy our music on CD, it will be at your own risk. We make no promises whatsoever as to the quality or nature of any of our future bonus tracks. They may well be more unlistenable than this even, Paul doing his vocal warm-ups or something like that. We're sorry to have to do this to you, but feel it's ultimately for your own good, and it's pretty much what everyone else is doing anyway. We're just being a bit more upfront about it. We think it's better that you burn your fingers just the once, and at least have the chance to learn from the experience, than to spend a lifetime being fleeced and maybe never even notice. So unless CDs do start going blank after a few years, we're not expecting a world conversion back to vinyl. What we are hoping for, though, is a situation where vinyl is at least available for those who do want it, and the more people who request it, the more likely that will happen. And surprisingly, there has been some good news. Against all predictions, record sales actually went up last year in the States, as did turntable sales in Japan, plus 4 new pressing plants opened in the UK because of an increase in demand, mostly from Europe. And ironically, while vinyl may still survive, the death of the CD is probably inevitable. Now that the majors are out of back catalogues to reissue, and almost everyone who wanted to replace their record collections has probably done so, it could well be just a matter of time before the industry decides to back some new format, and the compact disc finally goes the way of its spiritual cousin, the Bry Nylon shirt, to spend the rest of eternity in the charity shop bargain bins, where they've always belonged. So for any of you who still haven't yet hit your remote, we thank you for your amazing patience, and we promise there'll be no more tracks like this if you buy our records in future. We might even throw in the odd poster or something. And again, we're sorry if this has been a bit of a drag, but we've been through a lot of hassle trying to make sure our stuff is completely free of digital effects and mastering and all of that. And now we've got our music sounding more or less how we wanted. We'd just like you to hear it in its full analogue glory, as we and nature intended, instead of through this sad piece of junk you laughably call the sound system. Anyway, thanks for listening, and have a good time all the time. Number 9. Number 9. Number 9. Number 9.